Steve Trulaske is the owner of True Manufacturing Company, which his father and our college's namesake, Robert J. Trulaske Sr., co-founded with his father and brother in 1945. True Manufacturing is a global leader in the manufacturing of commercial and residential refrigeration products. Steve, can you share with us the timeline of your family business? How did True Manufacturing come to be, and how have you seen the company evolve and grow since its inception?
So the idea for the company, my grandfather was working for a bakery company making ovens, and he was a tool and die maker. And he largely would go to the bar after work every day, and residential refrigeration was just coming into the home. So at the bar one night, he gets this idea to say, why don't we take this technology and put it into a commercial application, because all beer was cooled by ice. So that's really where the idea came. It came from a bar. Not many businesses can say that, right? But ours really did. But he had one problem. He's a sixth grade education guy. Didn't really have the business education, was obviously not a Missouri graduate, business school. But fortunately, my father came along. He came back from World War II, 1945. He had saved up $10,000 of flight pay. He had also made some money gambling, playing poker. And then he arbitraged between the French franc and the British pound. So the companies all started on those kinds of things. So it's a good story in that way. So they started making cabinets in their backyard in Wellston, Missouri. And then he'd go around to the bars and try to sell these things. And so initially the thought was that ice-cooled beer was much better, tasting-wise, than electrically cooled. And so they had a big sales problem initially. They started making freezers also, and then in 1948, Harry Truman declared meat rationing. So they couldn't make enough freezers. That was the impetus of the company going in the late 1940s. They dealt with enormous challenges as post-World War II economy. Like in 1948, the sales of the company were $100,000. In 1949, $50,000. But these guys come out of the Depression, they saved their money, they were living off my mother's secretarial salary, and so they got through those periods, and then in the 1950s, things began to take off. They got a relationship going with the 7-Up company. They started making these same horizontal coolers for beer for 7-Up. They give them to the grocery stores, and on the basis of keeping 7-Up products in them, and that started a new relationship with them that then morphed to the Pepsi-Cola company, then morphed to the Coca-Cola company. And the Pepsi-Cola company came and said, you know, we see these vertical glass door display refrigerators being developed and used, and we think we should have our supply base do that for us as well. So they were the first companies to be asked to develop this all-new product. And so they started making these things, and so this was really all new technology of the day. And so their strategy back then, they had no these sophisticated test labs that we have today, of course. So they had a relationship in business in Puerto Rico. They would build these glass door prototypes. They'd send them to their customers in Puerto Rico. And if they worked in Puerto Rico, they figured it's going to work everywhere, right? So that's how they got that product developed. So that was a really revolutionary product, to take product that was sitting on the floor in a horizontal type presentation to a vertical glass door display presentation. Everybody as a human being reacts to that much better. So that was a big initiative of the 60s that really took off. Then in the 1970s, my brother, who graduated from Missouri in 1971, my father gave him this new mission. Let's go beyond this beverage business, beyond Coke and Pepsi. Let's go into the food service equipment business, making refrigerators and freezers for restaurants, for hotel kitchens. And there was all these manufacturers out there, and the last thing the world needed was another refrigerator for that application. And they went to the National Restaurant Show in 1972, and you know, no one really came in, and they were thought of as this cooler company that made coolers for Coke and Pepsi. But as we all know, Rob just did this incredible job, and today we make over 900 different types of refrigerators and freezers for that world. He led an incredible development of a sales company, built a whole sales force, led product development, worked closely with my father on all that, and through the 70s, 80s, 90s. And you would say about the early 1990s was when True finally ascended to the top of the market share world in that industry. And so along the way, I come in the early 1980s, and when I came in, you know, there was Grandpa, there was Uncle Art, there was 2 cousins, my brother. There really was nothing for me to do here at that time. It was still a very small company. But I had experience outside the United States, and so I went to look to develop our business outside the U.S. And so that was my mission. It was a wonderful mission. I loved it. And so that is a big part of our business today, is taking both the beverage and international food service around the world. And so the 80s, 90s, 2000s seen great growth there. So we're exporting out to 93 different countries. And today we have, like I say, over 900 models, and we're a dynamic force to this day in food service, beverage markets, and now residential. We're making our residential effort. And that's also very interesting and beginning to go well.
That's fantastic to hear. And I'll ask you a little more about the innovation that's leading you into that new market in a second. But I want to talk about innovation more broadly. And it's very interesting to hear that timeline in a line chronologically from really beginning to present, the way you described it, because even though I've heard the story many times, it's actually the first time I've heard about the horizontal to vertical component, and what a tremendous insight that was to recognize what a consumer wanted and to shift accordingly to, today we would say pivot, right? Literally, in your case, from horizontal to vertical, but also to respond to a market demand and modify your product accordingly. Since this is at the core of what has made you the company that you are today, how would you describe how this leads you to analyze innovation, market pressure, opportunities, and pick which ones are going to work for you, which ones you might act upon?
Sure. So now we live in a much more complicated world, and we're a very mature industry. So dramatic innovation is a little more challenging. So first of all, what we do, if we have an idea for innovation, and let's just take, for example, the migration to hydrocarbons. Or R290 is the trade name, or we know that as isobutane or butane refrigerants. So first of all, we had an EPA problem. It was not approved for use in the United States. So we, True Manufacturing, had to lead the charge in Washington, D.C., along with General Electric and Ben & Jerry's ice cream, to say, let's get this approved. So today there's this huge regulatory piece towards oftentimes generating innovation. So you've got to cover that base off. That's critical. Obviously, you go nowhere if regulatory stops you. After that, we have to go down into our supply base. Does the supply base support this? Is it really going to work? Is it not going to have a lot of costs? Because we live in, of course, a very competitive world. Then naturally, our customer naturally has to perceive a value, obviously. That we all know that they perceive a value, which in this case of moving to hydrocarbons, it's both energy efficiency and it's a green refrigerant. Beyond that, we are always looking for, I think it's more smaller ways to generate innovation. Right now, for example, we got an idea we've launched with Kroger, and where it came from is very popular in the residential world. That's where we're playing in, and we got this idea, but what's big in residential are French doors, right? So we created the first French door, glass door merchandiser for Kroger. So that means you open up the doors, there's no mullion there, you see all the products. They loved it. So obviously a lot of communication, coordination with your customer, but we're the ones that have to generate the ideas a lot of times and present them to them.
Well, let's go back to the green advancements that you've made, because frankly, refrigeration hasn't always been known as a green industry, and you are really taking an interesting lead in this and developing a tremendous strategic alliance. GE, Ben & Jerry's, those are pretty good partners, and I'm sure they're equally proud to be working with you. Can you talk to us about the benefits you've observed from implementing this strategy, from making sustainability a part of the brand, part of the market focus?
It goes across in so many different ways. So for example, when we decided to take this route, it opened the doors to new suppliers we really had not considered before, as far as compressor suppliers, because our existing base was not as focused, obviously, as some of the international suppliers that are more global. And we have found great new suppliers in all these components. From a company morale standpoint, this is huge. I mean, particularly as we bring young people in the company, they're 22 years old out of University of Business School or wherever, they want to be a part of a company that's doing something like this. And then obviously, I'll give you a perfect example. We were just at the McDonald's convention. They have every 2 years. This is McDonald's hamburgers. And we have supplied them for about 10, 12 years around the world. We could have business with other countries, but we could never have business with them here in the United States. And it goes long, long relationships back in the 60s with our competitors. And what I will tell you, what opened the door was this initiative on green refrigerants. So McDonald's is going to be one of the first major U.S. chains in the U.S. to say all green hydrocarbon refrigerants will start first quarter of 15, and we are the most ready of all suppliers, ready to go do it. So that's a direct benefit.
That's pretty exciting, and we're very proud to have one of these refrigerators in Cornell Hall on campus at the University of Missouri, which we tell our students about when they come into the Welcome Center. It's a very exciting way for us to observe the partnership evolve. So you talked about employee morale here with response to that particular strategy, but that's actually been a hallmark of your company from the beginning: employees first, employee profit sharing, education assistance, large past and current employee brand loyalty. A lot of your employees are also Mizzou graduates. We have some in school right now. They're consistent in their passion for and appreciation for the opportunity to work here and the relationship that they have with the company. How have you maintained these positive relationships? What do you think has been the upside, beyond the obvious, of this loyalty that has come from investing in your employee base?
What's so striking about when you invest in your employees, and what is so unusual today, is that you keep people for a long time. Mm-hmm. And this continuity thing is, to me, just huge for us, particularly as you have these long times to implement new things. And so if you have to constantly float new people in, that's a much more challenging environment. As we work with a lot of customers, big Fortune 500 companies we deal with new people all the time. It is really tough to encounter that situation. So today, education is a big part of what we do with our employees, and to encourage education to go back. And so many of our folks, and we support them for functional reasons, to go get your MBA, to go get your executive MBA, specific courses, and so that education piece. And then we do a lot of leadership training internally within True. And so they really have loved what does it mean to be a leader. And funnily, my father's thing was about the ability to communicate and always let your employees say what they want to say and make them feel like they're not going to get their heads chopped off. So that, to me, is that continual effort, is that communication paths are open. That is really a big thing that we do.
Mm-hmm. Well, we see it, actually, when they talk about you and when we meet them and when we meet their children, because a lot of their children come to the University of Missouri, too. So it's been a lovely partnership for us to see on our side of the business. So let's shift for a second and talk about the global aspects that you were referring to earlier. We've talked before, and I've sent you pictures from my travels when I find evidence of True's global footprint in some of the obvious large international markets, but really remotely too. And to the point, I think one of the pictures I sent was on a mountainside with a goat tied to the side of the refrigerator somewhere in South America that I can't even recall exactly where. How did you all really establish this global footprint, in addition to having the large product line that you described, and how do you keep it going given the level of competition in your industry?
So when BMW brings a car to the United States, if you go to Germany, you'll see they have so many more variations of the cars of a given model in Germany. And what we get in the United States is a very specialized version. And we have to do the exact same thing. There's some markets where what we do in the United States completely translates. So, for example, Canada. Canada is like an extension of the United States. So virtually everything we do in the U.S. translates into Canada. And that's relatively easy. But then you go out to Europe, you go to the Middle East, you go to South America. Then you have to get into what really works in Chile. We can't sell 900 different refrigerators in Chile. So when I got this thing going, the painful lesson that my father gave me the chance to go through is to decipher how that works. So having gone to school in Germany, my dream was we're going to just conquer that German market, right? Yeah, so I pounded and I pounded and I pounded in Germany, and with very little result. And then one day I get this lead to go to Spain. So go to Spain, sell all these refrigerators. Made my father very happy, saw why it worked. So it was going through those experiences to make that deciphering possible. So much today what we do, we go to a new place. What is the right model? What is our strategy? And so that's really what we do. And then after that, we're about service. I mean, it is about parts. It is about things go down, these things break, they get fixed. And so our goal is to fix a cooler in Singapore as fast as well as we do in St. Louis. And that's kind of the mantra of the company.
That's very interesting. So there's a lot of cross-cultural competency in that, but also a lot of the core, the spine of the brand and the story remains intact no matter where you are. It's an interesting overlay. And it really brings me to my next question, because the international distribution is obviously very extensive, but you've really remained at your core an American manufacturing company. Your operations are right here in Missouri. What advantages have you found in staying American for your manufacturing, and what do you forecast for the future of this effort?
Well, again, where we are today on that manufacturing piece gets honed by making mistakes. And so we had this phenomenal business going on in Europe with Coca-Cola Company 20 years ago, and they basically said, we don't want to pay for this freight to Europe, and we want you to build a factory over here. And if you don't, all your business is gone. And so we pounded around Europe to find a place. We looked very hard at Eastern Europe. The wall had just fallen, but it was really uncomfortable to build a factory in Poland in 1994. So as Americans, as many do, we ended up in the UK. And the UK is not a great place to manufacture. We're a vertically integrated manufacturer. All of it broke down. All of our things that work for us in the United States don't translate in that situation in the UK. And oh, by the way, 2 years later, the Coca-Cola Company goes, oh, you know what, we're going to source the world. This regional manufacturing thing, we're off of that now. So what we learned is the reason this place hums so much is we have such diversity and our production lines are very flexible. And it's hard to translate that outside the U.S. in the first factory out. So today what's really been beneficial is the incredible technology that's out there to incorporate into manufacturing. So we really fundamentally believe in U.S. manufacturing. The technology piece is dramatic as far as the way we can cut and bend metal, the inclusion of robots. And when we bring this automation into the company, we're not letting people go. They're staying with us. They go to other jobs, they get trained to new higher level technical jobs. It's really a win-win. So the way of the world right now to us means a lot of sense to continue our effort in U.S. manufacturing. And it's a great story with our U.S. customers right now too.
Steve, the company really has had a tremendous history, but always stayed in the family. And now you're the leader of this company, this legacy that's had decades of successful endeavors. How are you putting your stamp on the family business while respecting that legacy?
Well, first of all, there was just fundamental strategies that came out of that era that my father started and Rob continued, and so we keep these things. And so what I try to do so much is to hang on to what really works and makes sense, that are just fundamental principles in human resource relations, to communication piece. We are a disciplined environment here. We are not an advertising agency. You cannot work in your sweatpants at home. So we're not for everybody, and we know that. And we try to be very upfront. This is who we are, and there's people who love us, and there's others that we don't fit. So we stay true to those things. So because we're in a mature industry, I have to drive innovation because it's a global economy now. When I started, there was no Asian competition. There was no Mexican competition. Now I have all these folks, all my friends coming in, and I compete with them around the world. So innovation becomes so important. So I think what we're doing today is a lot bigger spend on our research development. So prospectively, we used to have, say, 2 or 3 test chambers, say, 10 years ago. We will have 31. Regulatory has driven that partially, but it's about driving this new innovation. You have to pass all the certifications to deliver new innovation. So there's this huge investment in engineers, many from Missouri, but and then production process engineers too. So I really then have focused us to bring us up to modern, state-of-the-art manufacturing principles. And a guy named Steve Young, a great partner, is leading that charge for us, and so he's doing a great job. And so we are on our own lean journey right now, and so much of what we've learned is it is a true journey, true manufacturing, not the Toyota system, and bring it into true. So it's a lot of bumping along the road, but again, being privately held, we get the chance to do this thing right, make mistakes, and go along.
Mm-hmm. So you've been very generous about sharing aspects of that story as it's come along with our students when we bring them by, and with our peers when we talk about trends in industry, and with us here today. Your family has historically made tremendous investment in education, and we have such a legacy in the Trulaske College of Business as a result of that partnership. How has investing in education fulfilled yours and your family's philanthropic goals?
Well, I think it really, a family like ours, so the understanding of where we come from as far as, you remember what your grandfather was like, a sixth grade education guy, and to see your father be the first one to go to college, and it is still at this level in our history of our family, just as such this transformational period for us as a family. And so, when you go through that, then you want to give back to that. So it's the top of mind thing for us as a family. Obviously, we're just so close to what a difference it makes, and we still are, and I hope we always are.
Well, we're very grateful for that, and we like seeing the next generation go on and pursue their studies and take the next steps. And it is really a pleasure, and it's something that we know from our side is incredibly transformational, really creates access in ways we couldn't. One of the ways that you shared that story with our students was back in 2012, you gave the commencement address to our graduates, which I really enjoyed. And one of the things you said during that address, you had several really good lessons for the students and for the faculty like me who are sitting on the stage. But one of the things that really stuck with me was when you challenged the graduates to be the next great generation. And you did that on the heels of telling your father's story and how he leveraged his opportunities in order to be sort of unconventional in how he put this business together with such great success. Can you talk for this audience about the connections you see between that generation and this generation, the times then, the environment today?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities because this generation right now going through school and their college time is at a similar, I think, juncture in the world as my father's. Tremendous global competition one way or another. Even back in the 40s, in a different way, they faced the World War II situation. What I see is that the generation of Americans today really has to realize it's a global world and there's tremendous competition against them. It's not the same. So one of the things I certainly have learned is you always have to set your bar high. If you don't set it high, then you're not going to go high. So I think the United States is at a fundamental crossroads. We need another transformational generation like my father's, and that's what's my inspiration.
Mm-hmm. Well, as I know both of us are parents of children in this generation, so we're hoping for the best for them doing exactly what we need for them to do, fingers crossed exactly. So as educators, we're trying to make sure this generation's ready. And as one of our partners in this educational journey that we're stewarding, what do you think we need to do as educators to maximize our ability to give this generation, equip these students with what they need?
I think the thing I would share, there's a number of things. But the first thing that really struck me was after graduate school, when I was about 30, I went to Wharton for a seminar, and we took all these personality tests. And they really sat down with you after the test, and they told you who you were, what your strengths were, what your skills were. And that was not something that came out of my educational period. And I don't know what's going on today, but I would advocate to anybody, find out who you are, find out who your skill set is, what your skill set is, and make sure you line up in pursuing that. That, to me, is so critical. So I would advocate that. After that, all the stuff, I think you get the same kind of feedback, be global. I think the communication piece, salesmanship, I don't care if you're going to be an accountant, you're going to be a salesman. And I think you guys are doing a great job of that stuff. So.
Thank you, thank you. We work a lot on a broad set of skills for our students, and we also, even if they intend to go into a more analytical field, we talk to them about their own brand, their personal brand. And I've heard you talk before about how at the end of the day, everything ultimately becomes sales, and we talk to them about that too. There's another side to this. There's the part that we offer the students, but there's also the students embracing and taking advantage of what we offer. So if you were to advise our students in general, what do you think a student should do with the opportunity and education offers in order to be ready to face this challenging global world that we've been talking about?
I really recommend that they get themselves outside the United States somewhere along the line. I think for the opportunity that they've given themselves, they graduate from the Trulaske College of Business, that is the first thing they really want to go do. And then after that, it is, I think, making sure that their feet are on the ground. And the world can whipsaw you around and you get different perspectives. Always work at that. That's what I would say.
Okay, that's great advice. So thank you very much for sharing your insights with us today and for being such a wonderful partner to us. And we always end by saying go Tigers, so we have to remember who we're representing, so go Tigers.
Go Tigers.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Joan.